G'day folks, welcome to this playthrough of the 1796 introductory scenario, Bonaparte in Italy from Nations in Arms. This is a four-turn, four-season scenario, pitting the numerically superior coalition forces, mainly Austria, against the superior leadership and superior troop quality of the French, as the French try to invade northern Italy and seize some victory cities. Something to note about this scenario is the uncertain situation of Genoa, and I'll talk about this throughout the scenario. I start the scenario with this in coalition hands, then I think, no, it must be French, so I switch over to French hands. Then I read a bit more up on the history, and Genoa was historically neutral at this point, but French, in fact, Bonaparte requested permission, access through Genoese territory, which I think was denied. Nonetheless, I think the threat of Genoa was used by Bonaparte as a bluff to draw coalition forces down towards Genoa, and Bonaparte then moved around to the left, the west, in almost like a flanking move. So I've kind of house ruled this to treat Genoa as a sort of a hostile neutral. They are listed as an objective city, a VP city. So my thinking is they're part of this scenario. French troops start set up in Genoese territory, but there's no diplomacy phase in this, so there's no opportunity for the French to declare war on Genoa. And it's not explained. So I'm treating Genoa as a hostile neutral, with the French and coalition forces able to lay siege and capture Genoa and move through Genoese territory. All right, let's see how this plays out. So here we have the initial setup for this scenario. You can see it's bound by these purple lines. So it's a very contained area in the southern Alps, north of Italy area. We do have neutral Switzerland, and I think Bavaria, Württemberg are both neutral at this stage. So you can see the purple line around there. So all the action is really taking place in this area. To win, one of the two sides needs to capture 12 objective hexes by the end of the scenario, which pretty much means all of them. Mantua here counts as 3 and is pretty much essential because there are, if I can find them all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 plus Mantua. So there's up to 16 VPs available, but this is a critical one. And at this stage, early in the scenario, the coalitions, mainly the Austrians, control the bulk of them. It's really up to the French to seize the initiative and start sweeping through northern Italy. The Austrians at the start have a slight superiority of forces, slightly more infantry and cavalry steps and detachments, but the French, of course, have Bonaparte. Now, I'm keeping all the units on the map. I'm not using the army boxes off to the left. These are not huge stacks, so I'm not too worried about it. Famous last words as I send cannons flying all over the place. But yeah, stay tuned and we'll see how this develops. Okay, so with the initiative, the French selected their Empire Land 4 activation, which mainly lets them activate Bonaparte and his army of Italy. They integrated the two adjacent forces and moved through the mountains and on to the Piedmontese force under Colli. This is a very lopsided battle. You've got Bonaparte with his +3 combat value. You've got a strength ratio of 2-1. There was a cavalry superiority for the French, artillery superiority, and Colli did try to withdraw but failed that. So his force was entirely destroyed and the French lost just one step. They spent the movement point to continue the movement and then overran another small force under Argento in this hex. Now, the Austrians decided just to sit here and watch. They would like to, as much as possible, avoid battle with Bonaparte. He's got this big stack here of about 5 or 6 steps, and the Austrians are outnumbered, outgunned, and are facing superior quality French troops. So they'd rather avoid battle, and their thinking here is trying to delay Napoleon as much as possible. We've got 4 seasons to get through. There's a lot of fortifications to capture. Napoleon's initial move is to basically eliminate the enemy threat. Now he's going to start moving on those fortifications. Okay, so we're 2 more activations down. Unfortunately, the coalition drew a coalition land 4, which means they can't activate any of their commands. We pass then straight back to the next chit drawn, which was an Empire Land 3, which suits the French very well. They were able to move Kellerman and his small force into Turin. They tried to lay siege, but haven't done any damage just yet. Napoleon could also spend his second activation, and he's moved up to attack the army of Italy under Valmy. Unfortunately, I mean, the French have huge modifiers here. I think it was a +6 in battle. They threw Augureau, lead infantry. The Austrians don't have a lot to offer in response, but the French rolled snake eyes and caused no damage to the Austrians. The Austrians counterattacking also caused no damage, but got a plus symbol on the combat result. Let me show you what this is. So the plus symbol, I think they rolled around here, a 9, and the plus symbol means that they win ties. The Austrians win that combat. Bonaparte defeated and is forced to retreat back to his space with his activation now over. They also, I mean, the Austrians tried to retreat, and the French had their flank march card, which is a -4 dice roll modified to combat avoidance, which meant that failed, which was also a negative modifier in combat for the Austrians, because they failed their combat avoidance. So Bonaparte was really keen to force battle here, but he lost with those snake eyes. There was a great opportunity to wipe out the last remnants of the Austrian forces in northern Italy, and Bonaparte failed. That's how it goes. I've also just incidentally replaced the control markers with blue to show what the French now control. So they've got 3, 4 out of the 12 they need. So if the scenario ends with neither side controlling 12, it is a draw. So really, it's going to be hard for the Austrians to counterattack. I don't know how they can get up to 12 with their inferior forces, but it's certainly Napoleon has the opportunity to seize northern Italy if he can roll better in combat. Fortunately for the coalition, the next counter drawn was Coalition Land 1, and at this stage the Austrians are facing a numerically superior French force with far superior leaders and units. So they make the difficult decision to retreat to the east towards Bologna. They're giving up basically Lombardy and pulling back, waiting for their reinforcements to come on. Giving up Milan in effect. It's tough. They don't want to fight Napoleon, even though they managed that one minor victory. It's going to be difficult to repeat that. Following this, we had an Empire Land 1, and the French finished the siege of Turin, but opted not to reactivate that fortress. Now, at this point, I'm still of the mindset that Genoa is French, and so I moved my detachment into Genoa to extend my supply link. I undo this in a moment. So whilst you can see a detachment there, I later rethink this and move them back around, so don't worry about what you can see here. And it's at this point that I think, no, Genoa must be neutral. So I place a neutral marker on there, and that detachment has linked up with Bonaparte's main army. We had, I mean, by this stage, the French have spent their activations. There's a coalition land too that came out as well, but the coalition is also spent, and that's pretty much the end of the first season. The second season started off with a Empire Land 3 activation, which suited the French perfectly. They had a small force move out from Turin towards Milan, and they began to lay siege to that. But again, they were rolling terribly in their siege attempts and didn't get anywhere with this. Now, because they're looking to push out to the east, Genoa is an important place. Now, as I said earlier, my thinking here is that the French started off occupying Genoese territory. They've got to be at least a hostile force, so I kind of house ruled this that they could lay siege to Genoa. And so Napoleon moved his main army in there and very swiftly completed that siege, capturing Genoa and enabling him to extend his supply link further out to the east. This was followed by a coalition, I think it was a coalition 1, and with Livorno now under threat, they decided to pull their attachments up to the north. There's a slight reshuffling of their detachments, but they're moving them sort of around Mantua. At this point, the main Italian army is in Bologna. Not a great place to be, and they soon address this. We then get an Empire Land 4, and because of the problem with this small force laying siege to Milan, Bonaparte moves his entire army up there, and with the artillery, that artillery superiority that this army brings, Milan swiftly falls. So that's another victory point for the French. At this point, they're on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 VPs, and gradually chipping away at that coalition lead. The coalition land activation has no effect. They don't do anything. With the Empire Land 1 activation, the French simply move their detachment up to be absorbed into Bonaparte's army to strengthen some of their reduced infantry units. We then get a coalition land 3, and it's at this point that Austrian army of Italy decides that Mantua is the more important priority, not Bologna, and so they again shuffle their force around to the north to basically occupy Mantua. And then, activations are pretty much over. I didn't put an activation marker on the Austrians, but they are done, and that sees the end of summer. So heading into autumn, we get some more Austrian reinforcements. Supply train, I think, a step of infantry. And Bonaparte begins by launching his needed attack on Mantua. He plays the bridge at Alcola event card, which removes the penalty for having a battle across a bridged or unbridged river hexside, plus it gives him a +1 combat bonus. Combat goes pretty well. The French cause 2 step losses on the Austrians. The Austrians cause 1 step and a plus. Now the plus is inconsequential because the French caused more step losses. So the Austrians are forced to retreat with some pretty heavy losses. In the end, they decide to retreat just to the southeast, wedged between those 2 rivers. I think it's the Po and the Adige. I could be wrong there, sorry. But they correct this in just a moment. The reason they did this, I think, was to be close to their detachments while still being in a position to block the southern route. With the next coalition land activation, they rapidly bring their reinforcements down from the north. They link up with some of their detachments to recover some step losses. And then we have an Empire Land 3. Now this is an important activation for the French. Napoleon detaches Messina to move south to Livorno, and
despite the previous difficulties for these small forces laying sieges, he kind of needs to do so to, I guess, improve his VPs in effect, but also he's got all his forces concentrated in one stack and he's limited in what he can do. So Massena moves south to Livorno to lay siege, whilst Napoleon continues the siege of Mantua. Some hits on the fortress, but the siege continues at 2 steps. Okay, so heading into the final season, and the Austrians get a lot of reinforcements this turn, which I'll show you in just a moment, but the French Empire once again draw an important land activation to start off the turn. And down the south, Massena moves towards Florence and spends some time laying siege to it, eventually capturing the city and not reactivating it. The coalition get I think it was a coalition 2 activation, and they use this to consolidate their force within their army of Italy. They bring this up to basically maximum strength with 12 steps in this army, and they're prepared to march on Napoleon in Mantua. Try and force him out of the city. That's an activation to bring these forces together, though. They bring in some of the infantry from the northwest, Innsbruck, I think it was, and they stop there. The French then get the next activation, and they use this to bring Massena up from the south towards Mantua to reinforce Napoleon's army. Now, they also receive some reinforcements over the seasonal change, which brings their strength up to just 7. So it's going to be a force of 7 under Bonaparte, the army of Italy in Mantua, against his force of 12. Unfortunately for the coalition, the next activation counter drawn was winter. And on winter turns, when the winter quarters counter is drawn, the turn instantly ends. So this great coalition army of Italy never got a chance to march against Napoleon and his army of Italy in Mantua. That ended the turn of Italy, brings us to the victory check phase, and the French find themselves on exactly 12 victory points. 3 for Mantua plus 9 others. So it's a French victory in this introductory scenario, and the Austrians are frustrated that the snow covered their path and they could not pursue Bonaparte. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened. Look, to be honest, I think Bonaparte still has the odds in his favour. He still has far superior troops, superior morale. I think he may even have an artillery advantage here, artillery superiority. This would have to be an attack across the Adige River, which would really penalise the coalition forces. So if it were to happen, I think they would lose anyway. This really demonstrates the power of Bonaparte and the superiority of French troops in general. So that is that introductory scenario 1796 from Nations in Arms, ending in a French victory, and certainly some valuable lessons to be learned about the imbalance between the forces.